You mentioned Lee Zeldin there. He's now a cabinet secretary. He responded and said it was actually Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who's a doctor that doesn't have any relation to the convicted sex trafficker. Unfortunate for that doctor, but that is who donated to a prior campaign of his. Do you want to correct the record on the people that
Listen, I never said that it was that Jeffrey Epstein. Just so that people understand, when you make a donation, your picture is not there. And because they decided to spring this on us in real time, I wanted the Republicans to think about what could potentially happen, because I knew that they didn't even try to go through the FEC. So my team, what they did is they Googled, and that is specifically why I said a Jeffrey Epstein. Unlike Republicans, I at least don't go out and just tell lies.
Is she actually serious right now? Is this the explanation that Jasmine Crockett is going with for her absolute failure on the floor of the House? Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Sean, and for those of you who are unaware, we've had massive updates in the Jeffrey Epstein case as of late, and among those updates was a drop of a whole bunch of emails from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, and included in those emails were messages from Jeffrey Epstein to the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands that was actually using questions from Epstein in real time during a House hearing. Now, this caused a bunch of people in the House of Representatives to try to censure this representative, and in response to that, Jasmine Crockett went onto the House floor and made the case that a bunch of Republicans, including Lee Zeldin, received donations from Jeffrey Epstein, and they should really think twice about going after this representative who was obviously in direct communication with Jeffrey, because they took money from him. The only problem with this is that it was a different guy named Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, the donations to Lee Zeldin in particular were given after the Jeffrey Epstein everybody is thinking of actually died. And Jasmine Crockett's explanation for this is not that she was wrong. It's not that she was just completely off base and an absolute idiot. It's that she was caught off guard because the censure vote came at her in real time as opposed to coming at her in the future. I don't know exactly what that means. And she just Googled who received money from Jeffrey Epstein. And in addition to that, she wanted to teach the Republicans a lesson about the name Jeffrey Epstein, which would indicate that she was knowingly lying, but she's saying that she wasn't. It's insane. It's ridiculous. We have to get into this, and Kaitlan Collins, of all people, is not accepting this explanation. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
One Democrat who's been on defense over Jeffrey Epstein is Stacey Plaskett. She represents the Virgin Islands. She was texting with Jeffrey Epstein the day of Michael Cohen's hearing. Her questions pretty closely followed the text messages between the two of them to ask about Rona Graff, Trump's longtime assistant. You were defending her today, or in recent days, yesterday, and you talked about Republicans taking money from a Jeffrey Epstein. Here's what you said.
So like I said, this all started with the revelation that the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands was actually in communication during a House hearing in real time with Jeffrey Epstein, and he was actually feeding her questions in order to ask a witness in said hearing. So of course, there was a censure vote in response to this, because obviously this is a very sketchy connection, especially considering the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was already a convicted sex offender at the time.
Listen,
about what you should ask.
I honestly know that he had never been convicted of any federal crimes at that time.
But he had been in jail already.
He had been in jail. And my deal is this. The Republicans are constantly texting with a 34-count convicted felon. So if it's okay for them to text him at any point in time, then I'm not going to say that that's right or wrong, especially to the extent that you're talking about kicking someone off their committee.
And as you just heard right there from Jasmine Crockett, apparently that's no big deal, nothing to worry about, because Republicans be texting criminals all the time too. They text a convicted felon, which is the evil bad orange man, Donald J. Trump, as if the paperwork violation that was trumped up by District Attorney Alvin Bragg is somehow equivalent to the conviction that Jeffrey Epstein had. And again, the fact that this delegate was taking direct orders from him. It makes no sense at all. But then, of course, this leads into Jasmine Crockett lying to the American people. So let us play this clip from the CNN interview and then go over her asinine response.
Who also took money from somebody named Jeffrey Epstein, as I had my team dig in very quickly. Mitt Romney, the NRCC, Lee Zeldin, George Bush, Win Red, McCain Palin, Rick Lazio.
So that was Crockett on the House floor, obviously trying to mislead the American people into thinking a whole host of individuals, including Lee Zeldin, the former gubernatorial candidate, current head of the EPA, the legend of Zeldin, was actually on the take from this individual, but it turns out it was completely false and ridiculous. And as I played in the open, when given an opportunity to correct the record, Jasmine Crockett's like, listen, I wasn't saying that that was the same Epstein. I was saying that it was somebody named Epstein. And if you actually listen to the tape, I knew I was lying at the time on the House floor, but I'm not going to take accountability for this. And I'm sure eventually I'm going to accuse everybody who are justifiably calling me out for being a liar and an absolute embarrassment, a bunch of evil white racists. But I also want to point out that this is an incredibly low IQ maneuver. When you start saying all these different people who it has never been reported received money from Jeffrey Epstein are in fact receiving money from him or did receive money from him, obviously people are going to look this up. Obviously, people are going to find out. Now, I know a lot of people in the left-wing media won't even cover this, so most people will just see the Jasmine Crockett attack, and then the story will just dissipate. It will be wiped out. But enough people are going to know about this, and even a reporter on CNN has to confront her on this because it's such an egregious and embarrassing lie. And again, I will just point out, like, imagine if a Republican went onto the floor of the House and they said, hey, you know what? So there's some politicians right here that are receiving money from Mohammed Atta. For those of you who are unaware, Mohammed Atta was one of the guys who flew planes into a building on September 11th, and they named like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, all the Muslim candidates, and they said, wow, they're taking money from Mohammed Atta. That's absolutely crazy that he funded them, and people just kind of moved on throughout the course of their day, only for it to be discovered later that the Mohammed Atta that they were referring to was not the 9/11 hijacker. It was actually a dentist in the middle of Michigan who's an upstanding member of society who unfortunately has that same name. You think that Republicans would get a pass on this? You think that anybody would not obviously point out the fact that the allegations and the insinuation was absolutely ridiculous? But Jasmine Crockett expects that free pass. She expects the soft bigotry of no expectations. That's why she talks in that ghetto ratchet voice that she did not use before, as we've documented on this channel, when she was in the Texas State House, because she wants to lower your expectations, because all she really wants is attention. She's not actually trying to govern or anything of the sort. And of course, she wants to cover for Democrat associations with questionable people because there's no morality there.
Because it was not the same one, that's fine. But when Lee Zeldin had something to say, all he had to say was it was a different Jeffrey Epstein. He admitted that he did receive donations from a Jeffrey Epstein, so at least I wasn't trying to mislead people. Now, have I dug in to find out who this doctor is? I have not. So I will trust and take what he says is that it wasn't that Jeffrey Epstein, but I was not attempting to mislead anybody. I literally had maybe 20 minutes before I had to do that debate.
Seriously, how stupid does Jasmine Crockett think her supporters are? I mean, obviously, they are incredibly stupid. If you vote for this woman, you're an absolute idiot. She's like, Lee Zeldin at least admitted to the allegations, as the Superman would call them.
False allegations and not facts.
That he received money from Jeffrey Epstein. But again, go back to my Mohammed Atta example, it's not really the same thing. I think the guy who actually was the sex offender feeding questions to a representative, even if it's a non-voting delegate, probably on the scale of bad things, significantly worse than somebody who, you know, received a donation from an upstanding physician that has nothing to do with any of the crimes that we're referencing. So this own from Jasmine Crockett that she thinks she got over Lee Zeldin, the legend of Zeldin, is insane. It's absurd. And again, it just shows how stupid this woman is. Again, an absolute idiot in every possible way. And by the way, this interview is like 5 minutes long. This particular segment, she keeps going.
I was not attempting to mislead anybody. I literally had maybe 20 minutes before I had to do that debate.
Yeah, but people might see that and say, well, you're trying to make it sound like he took money from
I did not know.
a registered sex offender.
No, but I literally did not know. When you search FEC files, and that's what I had my team to do, I texted them and I said, listen, we're going up. They are saying that she took donations.
Right, but
so then you have Jasmine Crockett say, I wasn't trying to mislead anybody. I literally had like 20 minutes. Again, you of course were trying to mislead people. That obviously was your objective. Why else would you look for somebody with the same exact name as the criminal that's on the tip of everybody's tongues right now, and then just drop that on the House floor like it's some big revelation? And again, as Lee Zeldin has pointed out in his tweet where he tells Jasmine to stop digging, Epstein because she's an absolute idiot. Jeffrey Epstein was already dead at the time that he received these donations from the doctor, who again has nothing to do with and is not related at all whatsoever to the criminal. So she's like, I wasn't trying to mislead anyone when I said that, they was getting donations from the sex offender guy name. It was just me. I didn't have enough time, so I just shoot off at the hip without enough time, and I'm Jasmine Crockett. You vote for me. I'm gonna try to run for president because I'm an absolute dumbass.
Someone might say, well, your team should have done the homework to make sure it wasn't the convicted sex trafficker.
Within 20 minutes, you could not find that out, not from just doing a quick search on FEC.
So as Lee Zeldin has pointed out, when you do that quick search in 20 minutes, one of the things that you'll discover is the date of the donation and the amount of the donation. And anyone who was interested in being informed at all whatsoever could have looked up these filings and realized that this Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, that has nothing to do with the criminal, donated after the criminal died, after he died in prison. That's when he donated. But Jasmine Crockett's team couldn't crack that code in 20 minutes. Do you know how hard it is to do anything in 20 minutes? They can barely use a computer. They're barely literate. Again, they work for Jasmine Crockett, so we can't actually expect them to hold themselves to any kind of standard.
So, number one, I made sure that I was clear that it was a Jeffrey Epstein, but I never said that it was specifically that Jeffrey Epstein, because I knew that we would need more time to really dig in.
So look, there are a lot of everyday IQ tests that we encounter throughout the course of our lives, and guess what? This is one of them. If you think that the issue with donations from Jeffrey Epstein is the literal name Jeffrey and then Epstein, you're an absolute idiot. You should not have the right to vote, and honestly, I worry about you driving a car because your IQ is so low. Obviously, and obviously, the issue at hand with Jeffrey Epstein has to do with the crimes that the Jeffrey Epstein everybody is talking about actually committed. Like, that would be the main issue. That would be the main concern, not the name, not the series of syllables back to back that happened to make up Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, again, imagine if I found somebody and he was friends or she was friends with a guy named Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, and I was like, oh my God, you're friends with Ted Bundy, you're friends with Jeffrey Dahmer, you absolute scumbag, you absolute monster, you should be disgusted, guilt by association, and then we find out that they're not the Ted Bundy that we know or the Jeffrey Dahmer that we know. It has nothing to do with them. I would be the idiot. I would be the fool. I would be the doofus. And then if I came and told you, no, you don't understand, guys. Like, nah. Here's the deal. I knew the whole time that it was a Jeffrey Dahmer or a Ted Bundy, but I didn't actually know at the time if it was the Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy. So I was just throwing it out there because, I only had 20 minutes to look up if they were friends with the dead serial killer. I didn't have any time to cross-reference that because I'm a representative in Congress.
Correct. Why do so many Democrats seem unwilling to say it's inappropriate to be texting with a registered sex offender about what you're going to ask a witness at a congressional hearing?
So I'm not going to necessarily say that that's the case. Now, this is somebody that was a former prosecutor. Now, I haven't sat down and talked about all the specifics of why Stacey was doing what she was doing. I know that when she got up and she spoke, she talked about the fact that this is one of her constituents. At the end of the day, what I know of prosecutors is that they are typically talking to co-defendants. They are typically talking to the people that have the best information. And what you had was the former attorney for the president that was sitting there. And honestly, we knew, or she knew, or at least Jeffrey Epstein presented that he was very cozy with the president. He had more information, registered sex offender or not. The bigger question is, why is it that the president was so cozy with a registered sex offender even after he ultimately ended up with some of his convictions? And seemingly, he had absolutely been on the plane with him. We know about the birthday card. The bigger question is, why is the president of the United States not the one that is in the hot seat for his relationship, instead of us saying, oh, you know what, we're going to take her off of her committee because he decided to text her. Stacey didn't initiate that chain. Jeffrey initiated that chain, and she took the information.
So this is so bafflingly stupid. I honestly don't know how to address it other than to point out that Jasmine Crockett must be stupid or think that you're stupid, or she must be some level of stupid, but also assuming you're dumber than her, because Trump is on the hot seat for the Jeffrey Epstein thing. In fact, the only reason the Democrats who had the power to release the Epstein files all 4 years of Biden's administration are talking about it now is because Trump indicated that he wasn't interested in releasing said files. That is the only reason it is a topic at this moment in time. And by the way, because people who are Trump supporters are actually more more principled than people who back people like Jasmine Crockett. They push for the Trump administration and for Republicans to release these files. That is why it's a thing. That is why the bill passed. Again, it is partially a partisan attack from Democrats on President Trump, putting him on the hot seat. So the idea that he has escaped scrutiny in this way is absurd. He hasn't even escaped scrutiny from his own base in this particular case. You're trying to deflect from that scrutiny, and you're like, oh, isn't it crazy that he knew things about the Orange Man after he had those convictions? She was texting this guy after the convictions. That's what was happening. That was what was going on. What is your excuse for that? You got absolutely nothing except Orange Man bad. Look, if I was a member of Congress and somebody presented me this absolute nonsense that again was completely unproven, I would react in this way.
No, we're not doing that. That's embarrassing.
My source tonight sits on the House Oversight.
But a huge part of Jasmine Crockett's shtick is that she never takes accountability for anything at all whatsoever, always blames the evil orange man and evil white racism. So now we're stuck with this ridiculous interview where Jasmine Crockett is trying to dance out of reality, even though she was clearly trying to mislead the American public. But again, that's my opinion. I want to know what you guys think about all this down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Jasmine Crockett getting caught in one of the most low IQ lies humanly possible. Till next time.